Back in 2013, Harbor Island still smelled of salt water, diesel, and old grain dust that floated out of rusty silos beside the Duwamish River. My name is David Kim, and I was 18, just weeks from finishing high school in West Seattle. Every weekend, my 4 closest friends and I went looking for excitement in places most people tried to forget. We climbed half-abandoned rooftops downtown, crawled under Beacon Hill through service tunnels, and once snuck onto the empty deck of the Smith Tower after the tour guides went home. We said we were exploring the city, but we were running away from the thought of jobs, rent, and college. There were 5 of us that night. Marcus Ruiz carried a cheap secondhand Nikon camera and took photos of every broken window and every no trespassing sign. Logan Brown never talked much, yet he always showed up with bolt cutters in his backpack. Ben and Eli Harding were identical twins and track stars who could outrun anyone. Then there was I, the one who still worried about report cards and curfews. We had heard stories about the empty Fisher Mills flour plant off Clickett Avenue. The building had been closed since a dust explosion scare in 2006. Security crews had welded steel plates over the doors, but other explorers said they had found gaps big enough to squeeze through. We met just after sunset and parked under the West Seattle Bridge, where the freeway noise could hide the sound of our engines. The night sky was clear but moonless, so the cranes at the port looked like black bones against a few scattered stars. Wind from Elliott Bay rattled loose traffic signs, but beyond a chain-link fence, the mill looked strangely silent, as though all that noise could not reach it. Logan checked his phone. It was 9:47 p.m. He knelt at a gap in the fence where old metal links bent outward and crawled through. One by one, the rest of us followed. Gravel popped under our shoes, loud in the still air. Yellow street lamps painted the yard in a sick orange glow. Flakes of metal peeled from corrugated walls like fish scales. Fresh graffiti that read, "Drone," shone wet under Ben's flashlight. Someone must have sprayed it only days before. That told us people had been inside recently, and the building was not sealed tightly. Eli found a short side door with its padlock missing. We bent under a warped steel plate and stepped into darkness that smelled of mildew, wet wheat, and old engine oil. Our headlamps cut thin cones through drifting dust. Conveyor belts hung from the ceiling. The 5 of us spoke in whispers, partly so we could hear each other and partly because we were afraid a loud echo might bring patrol officers. The plan was simple: explore the first floor, climb the stair tower to the roof, take some pictures, and leave before 11. We kept moving north through what used to be the packing room. Split sacks of flour lay open like drifts of snow. Each footstep sent small white clouds swirling around our ankles. Marcus's camera shutter clicked every few seconds. After about 20 minutes, Logan stopped and raised a hand. He whispered that he heard something. All lights were pointed down, so our eyes could adjust. I held my breath. At first, I heard only the building breathing. Metal sheets groaning in the night wind, loose wires tapping beams, water dripping from a cracked pipe. Then I caught a new sound, a slow scrape, like a heavy cloth bag sliding across concrete, followed by uneven shuffling footsteps. It seemed to come from the stair tower in the center of the building, a tall cage of steel grating that climbed through 3 floors. Ben mouthed that it might be a raccoon. Marcus gave him a doubtful look. The weight behind that shuffle felt too big. I wondered if a homeless person had moved in, or maybe another group of adventurers had slipped inside. Many unhoused people camped under the nearby Spokane Street roadway that year, but the dragging noise felt too deliberate, as if someone was pulling something important. We crept toward the stairwell in a loose half-circle, careful to avoid broken glass and rusted metal sheets. With each step, my heart thumped harder until my pulse filled my ears. The gate on the stair tower sagged open, its hinge bolts snapped long ago. Logan aimed his flashlight upward. Dust glittered in the beam, but no shapes moved. He shone it down the stairs again. Nothing but concrete steps in darkness. We stood very still and listened. The shuffling noise stopped, as though whoever made it had also chosen to wait. I could taste metal on the back of my tongue. My flashlight felt slippery in my hand. Behind me, Marcus shifted to warn Eli to slow down. His boot crushed an empty water bottle. The crack echoed like fireworks. I jumped. Ben, who guarded our rear, cursed under his breath. That single noise triggered chaos. A scream erupted from the dark below us. It was deep, longer than any normal shout, and shook the hollow stair tower so hard my ribs vibrated. The voice sounded like an adult man, but it was so raw that it almost did not feel human. Reflex took over. Logan sprinted first, turning back toward the exit we had used. The twins followed with athletic speed, barely touching the floor. Marcus grabbed my sleeve and yanked me along before fear locked my knees. We fled across the packing room. Cloud after cloud of flour dust burst under our steps, making the concrete slick and ghost white. I slipped, caught my balance, and kept running. At the side hatch, the cold air slapped my cheeks and woke a sharper fear. Outside, the scene had changed. A small crowd, maybe 10 people, wrapped in layers of sweaters and sleeping bags, now stood between us in the open yard. Harbor Island's homeless camp must have shifted here while we were inside. Their eyes reflected our lamps like mirrors. No one said a word and no one tried to stop us. We threaded through them, too scared to apologize, focused only on reaching the fence. We crawled through the gap and stumbled to our parked cars. My hands shook so badly that I dropped my keys twice. We piled inside, slammed doors, and stared back at the dark outline of the mill. Nothing moved. No more screams cut the air. Logan's phone showed 10:23 p.m. We had been inside for less than 40 minutes, though it felt like hours. Driving across the bridge toward home, no one knew what to say. Every idea sounded thin. Maybe a squatter had yelled to scare us away. Maybe another group of explorers had played a prank. Yet some pieces refused to fit. The scream had felt close and loud, yet somehow flat, as if it came from everywhere inside the stairwell instead of one place. The group outside the mill did not look surprised or annoyed. They looked like they already knew something was wrong. The following afternoon, Marcus sent us the pictures he had taken. One frame, shot at 9:58 p.m., just before Logan first heard the dragging sound, froze me in place. In the background, halfway up the stair tower, a figure leaned over the railing. The shape was human, but the torso seemed stretched, the shoulders too high, the arms too long, as if someone had grabbed the photo and pulled the chest area like soft rubber. Everything else in the shot, from the steel bars to the dust particles, was sharp. Only the body was blurred. I stared until my head ached, and then closed the file. I saved it to an external drive and have not opened it since. Over the next weeks, we talked about reporting what happened. Yet what would we say? We had trespassed, heard a scream, and run. Police would likely find us and shrug. We promised each other we were done with serious exploring. College application deadlines, part-time jobs, and relationships soon nudged the promise into place. By summer, the mill faded into a strange memory we tried not to examine. In 2019, the Fisher Mills buildings were demolished so the port could add more container storage. When I first saw the empty concrete pad, I felt relief. No one, human or not, could hide there anymore. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. The incident I want to share with you today happened in 1993. Even after all these years, I am just as frightened today as I was then. I have never publicly spoken about this or written about this for the fear of my safety. It has tormented my thoughts and dreams, and it has made me afraid of the dark and given me anxiety. The big question of who and why remains unanswered. In a small farming community bordering Mexico and Arizona, with a population of a bit over 5,000, there is not a lot to do. No mall at this time, no skate parks, not even a movie theater. On this particular day, the weather was beautiful, sunny and cool, and I did not want to be stuck at home all day. So I drove my mom to work in a nearby town and promised to be on time to pick her up from work at 5 p.m. She reminded me not to smoke in her car, and I drove away, heading back home. I ate breakfast and took a nap. About noon, I picked up a friend, and we drove around town for a while, then went to the store and purchased something cold to drink and a pack of cigarettes. We drove around and talked, the usual girl talk, and the latest gossip we shared. When I grew tired of circling the same roads and hitting the same potholes, I headed out of town a couple of miles for a change of scenery. Traveling on a familiar road, I slowed down when I realized that I had driven past the road I usually would take back to town. I always made a point not to go too far because the paved roads turn into dirt roads, and it's no place for a family car. But I said, what the heck, I will just take the next road instead of turning around. We both scoped out the unfamiliar area, a huge eucalyptus tree, and a house of some kind I had never noticed. The closer we drove, it appeared to be abandoned, with the door flung open and windows busted out. Nothing at all about places like this appealed to me, but my friend is shouting, "Pull over there now," and I'm trying to talk her out of it, saying, "No way we are stopping. I do not like places like that." She is nagging. Let's see what they left when they moved. Realizing that she was not going to shut up, I reluctantly slowed down and turned into the overgrown driveway. She jumps out to curiously look inside the house. I turn off the car and get out to smoke a cigarette. I yell to her to hurry, I will be waiting by the car. She calls me a chicken. I don't care. I finish my smoke, pacing back and forth, anxious to leave. I noticed how overgrown with weeds and brush the yard had become over what looked like many years left unattended. I wander around a bit, checking out what little was left of this old, beat-up wooden trellis with dead, thorny branches all twisted and woven through it. A glimpse of animal fur caught my attention, and I looked closer and noticed what appeared to be a dead coyote hanging from one of the many branches. Dried blood dripped from it, and it looked as though it had been there a while. Gross. After a little more observation, as I am already stepping backwards towards the car, I realize there are numerous other similar carcasses sprawled here and there or hanging from branches. Also some were pelts, and others were the entire animal. I got the creeps with all these dead eyes staring at me. I had seen enough. I yell, "Let's go now." I jump in the car and yell again, "Get in, or I'm leaving you." My friend comes running out, wondering what was wrong. I point to the coyote skins. We drove back to town quietly and didn't say much. I dropped her off at her house and had just enough time to stop by my house and brush the grass out of my hair and the dust off of me before I picked my mom up. So I hurried. Gosh, what an unusual day it had been. My mom stood outside her office. She smiled and got into the car. She had not been waiting long. We go to Costco and pick up some groceries. She made the mistake of telling me to get a card also. I loaded up with what I thought our household needed, and we met at the register. "We are never doing this again," she said as she wrote a $300 check. After arriving home, we put away the groceries and I took a long shower, dried my hair, and dressed to go out for the evening. I fed my dog and told my mom I won't be out too late. I drove away in a very dusty and dirty Volvo after the country roads we traveled earlier today. It really could have used a wash. Maybe tomorrow, Saturday. I could have used my phone at home, but I had the habit of stopping by this small grocery store a block from home to use the pay phone next to the store. It was very close to the road, and if I parked the car close enough, I could talk on the phone from my car. Few people had cell phones at this time. I planned to call the same friend I was with earlier. We had made unclear plans of possibly going to visit her cousin. I started to dial her number when, from the mirror, I noticed a pickup truck coming up behind me at a high rate of speed. I stared at it in the mirror, realizing at the last minute this truck was not slowing down. With my car already running, I dropped the phone receiver, leaving it swaying back and forth from the short cord. I slammed it into drive with the accelerator pressed, trying to avoid being struck from behind, and I quickly sped away. Why would this driver want to hit my car? It was obvious that this was exactly what was intended, considering there were no other cars on the road. He had to drive far left to the shoulder of the road to purposely get behind my parked vehicle. If unintentional, why didn't he slow down? He never even slowed down. Now he is on my tail again, and there is a stop sign coming up. I do not want to drive through it, but this guy in this large-sized pickup, the kind used to tow an RV, is inches from my car. If I chose to stop or even slow down, he would ram the back of my car. Giving me whiplash is not the only damage he intended to do, and I'm certain he is trying to make me wreck and then kill me.
Why?
At one point, I drove past my friend's house. She looked confused as I didn't stop to pick her up as planned. Instead, I sped past with a cloud of dust and a white Chevrolet truck extremely close and viciously trying to plow into me. With no other choice, I raced through the intersection, almost closing my eyes, fearing another car or pedestrian might cross my path. This maniac is still no farther away. I buckle my seatbelt and sit up straight. I drove like my life depended on it, turning corners, managing to not hit a parked car or a lamppost, using only the gas pedal and seldom the brake. I reached speeds up to 80 miles per hour on residential streets, trying to get away from this psycho. With some good driving and determination, I managed to lose him. So, driving by my friend's house again, I saw she was still standing outside. I slowed down, keeping an eye out for the crazy person with a lead foot and anger issues. She quickly hopped in, and not wasting any time, I drove away. We didn't talk. I was shaking. I needed to stay focused on driving. In a town this small, he probably wasn't too far away. It probably wasn't over. Finally, I saw a police car, and I hoped he would pull me over for speeding, but that didn't happen. I knew with what I had been through tonight, I needed to tell the police. So I waved out my window for the officer to stop. When he did, I frantically told him about the truck and asked him to stay close by so he could help me because any moment he would be back to terrorize us again. The officer turned to me and jokingly said, "Why don't you go home and get some sleep?" I slowly drove away, feeling tired, helpless, and now teary-eyed, wishing I could do just that. Go home and sleep. I spot the truck again as he drives through the intersection ahead of me, as if searching the block, hunting us down. I hear his engine roar as it gains speed, heading towards us again. I start to cry, thinking this night keeps getting worse and worse, and about what the cop said. My friend says, "Stay strong and just drive like you did earlier." I took a deep breath and gained some much-needed confidence. My car was still running strong and not getting hot. I knew I could do this. Hopefully, I will know who and why. I drove around for what seemed like hours. I knew I probably could lose him if I headed out of town where I could drive faster, but I was afraid that if he managed to run me off the road, I knew he would kill us. It appeared to be over as the angry driver chose to turn off and disappear out of town. Still watching cautiously, I saw it was safe to finally unclench my hands from the steering wheel and slow down to a safe speed. We drove to my house, quickly got out, and ran inside where it was safe. Even though it was late, my mom was waiting for me, immediately asking me what kind of trouble had I got myself into. I wanted to tell her about the danger I was in tonight, but I was too physically and mentally exhausted. I just sat there, breathing heavily. With a very serious but also fearful tone, my mother insists I go outside and look at my father's car. I tiptoe carefully outside to the driveway. Stretched out on the hood of Dad's car was a taxidermy-quality black coyote staring back at me. Never mind the who and why. I've only been brave enough to try urban exploration once. Well, technically twice, but it was the same place both times. Thinking back, I'm not even sure why we chose to do it, probably boredom mixed with youthful bravado. Back in 2018, I was living in Charleston, West Virginia. My apartment building stood across from an abandoned motel called the Mountain View Inn. It had closed years before after reports of mold and safety violations, and eventually, it became a hot spot for graffiti artists and local teenagers looking to scare themselves. It was early October when my friend Dave came over one night. We had just finished a couple of cups of tea while watching a movie, and around midnight, feeling restless, we stepped out onto my balcony. The Mountain View Inn loomed right across the street, boarded-up windows and doors casting odd shadows beneath the pale orange glow of the streetlights. Dave jokingly suggested we check it out, and surprisingly, I agreed without hesitation. Maybe it was the tea giving me confidence. We crossed the empty street quickly, hearts already starting to race, as we approached the dark building. We walked quietly around the property first, stepping carefully through patches of tall weeds that had pushed through cracks in the asphalt. It felt strange standing near something so forgotten and abandoned, yet still very much present in the heart of town. The motel rooms faced outward, each door accessible from the outside like a classic roadside motel. Most rooms had their doors open or missing entirely. We stepped inside one room, using our phone flashlights to peer around. The air was heavy with mildew, and I spotted the unsettling sight of discarded syringes and used condoms scattered on the floor. Graffiti marked the walls, bizarre messages that made me uneasy. We decided to move on. We checked another room, finding similar disrepair. Furniture overturned, mattresses ripped apart, and the same lingering odor of rot. Nothing surprising, but definitely unsettling enough for us to consider heading back. Dave, however, wanted to see the lobby. Reluctantly, I followed him toward the lobby building at the center of the complex. Unlike the rooms, it was more securely boarded, but a side entrance had been partially pried open, leaving just enough space to squeeze through. Dave went first, and I followed closely behind, heart now thumping in my chest. Inside, our footsteps echoed across the empty tile floor. It was colder here, darker, with only small beams of street light seeping through gaps in the boards. We paused briefly to let our eyes adjust. Then, just as I was starting to relax, my gaze caught something in the shadows across the room. Standing near the reception desk, partially hidden by darkness, was a tall figure. I froze instantly, my heart nearly stopping. Dave also noticed and went stiff beside me. We stood there, neither of us daring to move or speak. The figure was absolutely motionless, but I could make out his shape clearly, a man watching us silently from the shadows. My adrenaline surged, and suddenly the room felt very small. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only seconds, Dave whispered urgently, "We need to go." Without another word, we turned and bolted out of the building. I didn't look back, convinced the man would chase us, but nothing happened. We sprinted across the street, stumbling up the stairs to my apartment, locking the door behind us. We spent hours nervously peering out the window, watching for any movement, but the street stayed quiet. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and we fell asleep, agreeing never to go back. Days passed, and the experience slowly faded into something we joked about rather than feared. One sunny afternoon, Dave came over again, and our conversation inevitably circled back to the motel. He laughed about how cowardly we'd been, scared off by some squatter. Encouraged by daylight and feeling ridiculous about our fear, we agreed to revisit the lobby just for closure. It seemed harmless enough now. When we got there, everything looked exactly the same as it had that night. Cautiously, we stepped back inside the lobby through the same narrow opening. Sunlight streamed through cracks, making the place less threatening. My eyes immediately went to where we'd seen the figure. It was still there, standing in the same position by the desk, but now clearly illuminated by daylight. We saw the truth. It wasn't a man at all. It was a cardboard cutout, one of those promotional displays hotels sometimes used, advertising their website and online bookings. Relief washed over us, followed by laughter at our own foolishness. We had been terrified of a cardboard man. Shaking our heads at our paranoia, we turned to leave, ready to put the experience completely behind us. But just before stepping outside, something caught my eye, a shadow moving quickly past one of the boarded windows at the back of the lobby. My laughter died instantly, and my breath caught sharply. Dave noticed my sudden silence, following my gaze to the same window. "Did you?" he started to ask, but I nodded before he finished. We stood silently, waiting and watching, but nothing else moved. Eventually, we convinced ourselves it was just our imagination playing tricks again. We left quickly, but as I looked back one last time at the motel, a chill settled deeply into my chest. A question nagged at me, one I never voiced to Dave. If we had mistaken the cardboard figure for a man in the dark, then who or what had actually moved behind the window? When I think about January 17th, 1994, I still smell the stale coffee and diesel fumes that hung inside the Leathers Oil Company station on Division Street in Gresham, Oregon. I was 19 and saving for community college tuition, working the dawn shift 3 days a week. That Monday wasn't my shift. I had traded with Virginia and Decatur, so I could take an afternoon math exam. I've replayed that swap in my head 1,000 times. I woke a little after 6 to the squawk of our cordless phone. My manager, Harry, never called it home. His voice sounded flat, like all the air had leaked out of him. He told me 3 employees had been hurt and asked me to come down to help secure the store once detectives cleared it. I threw on my red leather jacket, hopped onto my rust blue Chevy S10, and drove the 10 minutes from Troutdale, half awake, half scared. Police cruisers choked the lot when I got there. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind off Mount Hood. A cop stopped me at the curb, but Harry waved me through. His mustache twitched when he talked. That morning, it didn't move. "They're gone, Shane," he said. Asterisk all 3. Asterisk. I remember staring at the oil-stained concrete, trying to picture what gone meant. Then an ambulance door slammed, and the metal clack made it real. Detectives led me inside after a short wait. The overhead fluorescents were off. Only the emergency lights glowed green over the exit signs. I noticed the safe door behind the counter yanked wide open. I didn't know yet that about $9,000 was missing. The register drawers sat gutted, like open mouths. My boots squeaked on the linoleum as they guided me past the coolers and into the storage room. The smell hit first, gunpowder mixed with motor oil. Virginia Endicott, 57. Her daughter-in-law, Mary Beth Carey, 25. And Rosalie Faggerts, 51. They lay side by side on the cement, face down, arms tucked under them, as if they'd been told to get on the floor. Each had a single black hole in the back of the head. Someone had executed them in less than a minute and walked out without smudging a single footprint. I stumbled outside and threw up behind the propane cage. The cold January air bit my lungs. I kept seeing Virginia's broad smile from the Friday before when she'd shown me pictures of her grandkids. Now the pictures would outlive her. News vans parked by 9. Reporters said the killings were the worst in Gresham's history. While they filmed, detectives asked me every question imaginable. Who had keys? Who owed money? Who had been fired? One name kept popping up, Tyrone Walters. 20 years old. 6 feet 4 inches. Black Panther tattoo on his stomach. He'd managed the station until August, when Harry let him go for skimming a few bucks from the till. Tyrone never yelled the day he got canned, never slammed a door. He just stared at Harry, then at the rest of us, like he was memorizing every face in case he needed it later. At dusk, my mom drove me home. I skipped the exam. Numbers seemed pointless. That night, the murders led every Portland broadcast. The anchor said police believed Tyrone had come in before sunrise with at least one accomplice, forced the women to open the safe, then marched them to the back and pulled the trigger 3 times. The camera zoomed in on his mugshot. Angry eyes, dark hair pulled tight. They warned he might still be in the metro area. Sleep never came. Every creak in our ranch house felt amplified. I pictured Tyrone in the hallway, silencer in hand, because dead witnesses tell no stories. The station stayed closed for 3 weeks. On February 10th, an informant phoned detectives, naming Tyrone as the shooter. By the time an arrest warrant dropped on the 16th, he was gone, maybe Idaho, maybe Mexico. Nobody knew. Lori Stevens, 23, got picked up for driving the getaway car, and Tyrone's cousin Larry Scherf went down soon after. Both pleaded out and served 10 years. 10 Christmases they'll see. Plenty more. Virginia, Rosalie, and Mary Beth lost every Christmas forever. Leathers rebuilt the shop, repainted the pumps, and even hired extra security. But I never went back. I picked up warehouse work instead. Still, I'd detour past the station sometimes, engine idling, trying to rewrite history. Maybe if I hadn't swapped shifts. Maybe if I'd recognized something off in Tyrone months earlier. Years rolled by. Gresham grew strip malls and subdivisions, but the murder stuck around like a stain on old concrete. America's Most Wanted aired the case in '95 and Unsolved Mysteries in '96. Each segment ended the same way, a silhouette slipping into the dark, a caption, asterisk, the suspect remains at large. Asterisk. Last summer, after 3 decades, I attended a candlelight vigil outside the station. A cold drizzle drummed on the canopies. The victims' families placed photos on a folding table, Virginia in a floral Easter dress, Rosalie holding a 4th of July sparkler, Mary Beth rocking her newborn son. The pastor asked if anyone who had worked with the women wanted to speak. I stepped forward before my legs could protest. I told the small crowd how Virginia once replaced my entire starter motor during her lunch break because she was tired of hearing that truck cough. How Rosalie brought cinnamon rolls every Monday. And how Mary Beth planned to finish nursing school. My voice trembled, but the words felt lighter as they left my chest. When the vigil ended, I lingered by the edge of the lot. The sodium lights washed the pavement in dull amber. A tall man stood alone near pump 3, hood pulled low, hands in pockets. Something about his posture, straight-backed, head slightly tilted, itched at my memory. He noticed me and turned away, showing nothing but his profile. I glimpsed ink peeking from under his jacket, right where a belly button would be. A cat-shaped outline. My stomach dropped the same way it had outside that storage room. A flash of fear rooted me. Then a bus groaned by, blocking my view for a moment. When it passed, the man was gone. Maybe it was just some random guy with a cougar tattoo. Or maybe the past had come wandering back, curious how his handiwork had aged. I didn't chase him. I got in my truck and drove home, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. On the freeway, I kept checking the mirror, expecting headlights to surge up behind me. None did. But I also never shook the feeling that someone sat 2 steps outside the circle of my headlights, keeping pace. I still follow updates. The FBI bulletin for Tyrone is older than most of the new agents hunting him. They say he could be living under another name, flipping burgers, filing taxes, maybe even teaching Little League. People think fugitives grow beards and hide in the woods. More often, they blend into crowds. It was early April 2004 when I got hired for the 3rd shift at the Speedway on Elm Street, Manchester, New Hampshire. I needed the money, and working overnight seemed simple enough. Stock shelves, mop floors, maybe help a few late-night stragglers coming home from bars. My first night alone on shift was a Tuesday, usually dead quiet. Around 2:45 a.m., I'd run out of things to do inside, so I grabbed a trash bag and went outside to tidy up around the pumps. The air was chilly but not freezing, typical spring in New Hampshire. Aside from a couple of empty coffee cups and cigarette butts, there wasn't much to clean. I moved over to refill the windshield washer fluid containers, using a plastic jug that sloshed noisily in the silent lot. The sound echoed weirdly off the gas pumps, and I was acutely aware of how alone I was. The store's bright lights illuminated the surrounding pavement, but left everything beyond the edges hidden in darkness. I had just finished filling the second container when headlights appeared down Elm Street. I figured it was a late-night traveler, or maybe someone getting off the highway. But as the car approached, I noticed it was a Manchester police cruiser. My immediate thought was maybe someone had complained about noise or some minor thing. The cop drove slowly, tires crunching softly on scattered gravel. He wasn't looking around aimlessly. Instead, he was focused intensely on the inside of the store, his eyes fixed on the cashier's counter. He never saw me standing by the pumps. He parked abruptly in front of the doors and jumped out, moving with urgency toward the store entrance. I dropped the empty jug back near the pumps and hurried inside, figuring I'd better see what was going on. The second the door chimed, the officer spun around sharply, startled by my presence. "Oh, hey," I said, trying to sound casual despite his reaction. Asterisk. "What's going on?" Asterisk. He exhaled deeply, obviously relieved to see me. "You scared me," he admitted, glancing around again. Asterisk. "Listen, the Dunkin' Donuts over on Hanover Street just got robbed about 20 minutes ago." Asterisk. I raised my eyebrows, suddenly feeling vulnerable. Hanover Street was just 2 blocks away. "We think the guy's still close," he continued, his voice serious but calm. Asterisk. "The thing is, he doesn't match our usual profiles. Didn't even take much cash. Looks more like he's just after a thrill, hurting people." Asterisk. I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Asterisk. "Okay. Thanks for letting me know." Asterisk. He glanced around the store one more time, making sure it was empty. Asterisk. "Just be careful. Keep an eye out and call us right away if something seems off, okay?" Asterisk. I told him I would, and he left. The cruiser pulled out of the lot, leaving me standing there, feeling suddenly exposed. I locked the front doors behind him, something I was technically not supposed to do, but I didn't care. If my boss complained, I'd explain later. I spent the next 15 minutes pacing around the store, glancing nervously at the clock and trying to ignore the paranoia creeping into my thoughts. Every movement, every shadow felt suspicious. It was 3:15 a.m., and normally by now, a few early commuters might trickle in. Tonight, the streets remained eerily empty. Around 3:30, headlights pierced through the store windows again. My stomach clenched. The car pulled into the far corner of the lot, partially shadowed by the tall bushes lining the edge of the property. It wasn't a police car, and it didn't look like a regular customer either. An old beat-up sedan, engine idling quietly. Nobody got out for several minutes. It just sat there. My thoughts raced, recalling the officer's warning about someone dangerous lingering nearby. Was this him? Was he waiting for me to unlock the door, hoping I'd come outside? After what felt like forever, I picked up the store phone, holding it tightly. I debated calling the cops, but decided to watch a little longer. Finally, the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. His face was partially hidden by a hoodie, and he walked quickly toward the gas pumps, moving oddly, head down. He lingered near the pump I'd been standing at earlier, examining something on the ground. I squinted, trying to see clearly through the glass. He bent down and picked something up, the empty windshield fluid jug I dropped. He stared at it a moment, then looked up sharply right toward me. Even at that distance, I felt like he was looking directly into my eyes. My pulse hammered in my ears. My hand gripped the phone receiver tightly, thumb hovering over the numbers. But before I could dial, he dropped the jug and turned abruptly back to his car. Climbed in quickly and drove away, no headlights, tires crunching softly as he disappeared into the night. I stood frozen, unsure of what I just witnessed or how to process it. He hadn't stolen anything or even tried the doors. Yet everything about his presence felt wrong, like he was making some kind of point by picking up the jug, by showing me he'd seen exactly where I'd been standing earlier. A patrol car cruised past about 15 minutes later, slower than usual, clearly looking for something. They didn't stop, and I didn't bother calling them now. What could I say? A strange guy picked up a plastic jug and stared at me. It sounded ridiculous even in my head. By the time morning came, my relief arrived to take over the shift. He joked about me looking exhausted. I laughed weakly, not mentioning anything from last night. But a couple of days later, while watching the local news before my shift, a headline grabbed my attention. Asterisk, police still searching for suspect in Hanover street shooting. Asterisk. They showed grainy surveillance footage. The man had a hoodie pulled up over his head. He had the same unusual posture, that same fast-paced walk I'd seen outside the store. And that's when something clicked. The police officer that night told me the guy wasn't after money. He just liked hurting people. But what the news mentioned briefly made it worse. The victim at Dunkin' Donuts had survived. The man didn't steal anything substantial. Instead, he had carefully taken the victim's employee ID badge, just that and nothing else. The news anchor speculated it might be a trophy. My mind flashed back to the windshield fluid jug. What if that had been another potential trophy? Something meaningless, but tied to me personally. Proof he'd been watching me, silently marking the moment we shared in that deserted parking lot? The unsettling truth settled deep into my chest. Whoever he was still out there. And whether the police found him or not, he knew exactly where I worked, exactly where I stood alone at night, and that he'd left empty-handed. At least for now.